Always the best residents.
Come means order. We don't have a flag here tonight. We do. We do? I was gonna say, John's gonna sing the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody. We cleaned our slate this week just for this very popular presentation here tonight. Mr. Stackhouse wanted me to bring our presentation. We were afraid of that. He wanted me to let you know that the bathrooms are in the rear and this is all the seating we have. So unfortunately, that's the best from the planning commission. We didn't prepare. So, did the best we could. We have some clerical things we got to take care of, and so we'll start by doing the roll call.
Okay, Jim Benko,
Here.
John Robinson,
Here.
Ken Simon,
Here.
John Caparelli,
Here.
John Adam Thomas,
Here.
Bill Shu,
Here.
Mike Roman is not here.
All good? Approval of the minutes. Make a motion to approve the minutes from last month, July. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Any discussion items or new items that take care of? All right, so we'll just get right to the main course here. Tonight, our applicant is Wild Meadows LLC to present us with a zoning amendment to the property located at 322 Lloyd Avenue, also known as the Lloyd Farm property. Our understanding is they are here to clarify the adoption of a new overlay district located in the site parcel 39-2-87 and show us a revised plan to replace the original one drafted, I believe, in October of 2018. Sound good? Date wise? I guess, Mr. Galvecchio, you were going to be the primary there? I am. A couple clerical things here before the applicant presents his plan. I'd like to first let everybody know that we are your planning commission. We are residents of the township, of course. We come from different professions, and we bring something to the committee. Each month, we have applicants come before us, and we listen to their presentation. We raise questions and objections, and after the answers are clear, we render our thoughts on recommendations and approvals. Tonight, we will try to end this meeting promptly at 9 p.m. Hopefully, wherever we are, I hope we all agree that's a fair amount of time. To make the meeting run smoothly, we allow the presenter to state their proposed changes to the current plan, and give them approximately half an hour to do so. Once they've completed their presentation, we'll reserve the first line of questions, and hopefully that should take us no later than maybe 7:45. And once we feel we've gotten the information, we will then open it up to the residents and for further comment and questions. When you are called, you want the name and address of the resident for the record?
Sure.
When you are called, we ask that you state your name and address for the record. And we'll ask that you keep your comments or questions down to 3 minutes to allow others to speak. We also ask that these questions and comments are specific to the project. Please, specific to the project. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. And our goal here as the Planning Commission is to help determine if this project is the best use of this property in this type of development. And with no further ado.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Luke Colagreco here on behalf of the applicant. I'm going to give a little bit of history as to the proposal, and I'll explain a little bit of the proposal, a lot of the ordinance amendment, why we're here. I'll ask Matt Hammond, our traffic consultant, to do a brief presentation because I know the traffic is a concern. That was the last time we were here. And then, as I understand it, the commission will ask questions, and then we can answer questions from the audience whenever the allotted time presents itself. So, the genesis of the proposal dates back a couple of years. It's for we call it the H Qualified Overlay District. And it involves the property that the Archdiocese used to own. Everybody's familiar with the location of the property. It's about 60 acres, give or take. When we were here last year before the Planning Commission, a recommendation was given to approve, by the Commission, to approve an ordinance text amendment and a map amendment, which would allow for the development right here to my left on this first tripod. That we were then going to proceed to hearing before the commissioners for enactment of that ordinance, but we never did. We received some feedback about the plan. We re-examined some things about the plan that we wanted to change. We took another look at the plan, and when we looked at the plan, that necessitated a change in the actual ordinance to actually propose less development than what we had originally proposed previously on the property. I want to do a couple of things first here to set the table. In the world of land development, this is just a text and map amendment. The plans you see are conceptual only. They've not been engineered. We do this for the benefit of ourselves, and we do it for the benefit of the commission and the commissioners, so they know that what the proposed development could look like on the property. This is the most reasonable scheme of development that would probably be placed on the property if it were developed as we propose. A couple of things stayed the same over the, with the two plans or the two amendments, and a couple of things have changed. I'll briefly go through them and explain to you what they are. Under the plan to my left, which we'll call the 2018 plan, there was an allowance in the ordinance for age-restricted apartment units. Mind you that the age restriction qualification remains in both ordinances. This is not market available housing, as they call it in the industry. It's only available for 55 and older. So that predicate of the plan has stayed the same. This proposal to my left, what the last ordinance proposed and what was recommended was 4-story apartment buildings. You'll see them in orange here. They were approximately 75 feet in height. There was going to be approximately 225 age-restricted units. And then it proposed the single-family detached lot scenario to my left. That hasn't changed a whole lot in the two proposals, but at the time, we were showing approximately 121 single-family detached, 225 apartment units, all age-restricted. We showed a pod out in front for potential future commercial development with various limitations, which we'll get into in just a couple of minutes. Over the course of, I would say, it's been almost a year now, over the course of the past, 8 months, 9 months, where we're looking at the plan, talking with various individuals, hearing some community feedback, we decided to amend the ordinance to come up with the plan here that's on my left. Notably, what has changed? Well, you'll see the deletion of any apartment units. There's no longer 75-foot high apartment buildings. The height in the ordinance, the maximum height in the ordinance is 35 feet. That's similar, well, it's identical to the height in every surrounding zoning district that surrounds the property. It's the same height as across the street, the C2 district, and by the street I mean the 322 corridor, and it's the same height as the residential districts that abut the property. So what we've substituted in place of the apartments are 92 townhouse units, and you'll see them in orange on this plan. There's still a clubhouse, it's a vital amenity to the property. The clubhouse is about 10,000 square feet. You'll see that the ordinance language says that the clubhouse can't be smaller than 3,500 square feet, can't be bigger than 12,000 square feet. We chose 10,000 square feet to see how it lays out. If this gets approved, and if we go forward with plans, land development plans, that clubhouse could be 8,000 square feet, could be 11,000 square feet. That'll be something that has to be fleshed out. But we think that 10,000 is a representative size of a clubhouse for a community of this size. So we've kept that size, even though the size of the community or the density of the community from a residential perspective has been reduced from almost 7 units an acre to 3.6 units an acre. The reason the density qualification is important is because the genesis of this idea actually came from the Callan Township Comprehensive Plan. The 2017 Callan Township Comprehensive Plan, recommended by the then Planning Commission and adopted by the then Board of Commissioners, called for age-restricted housing as a good idea on the Archdiocese property. The planning comprehensive plan said there should be a density bonus of maybe 5 units per acre if someone's willing to age restrict the units. So we've gone below the density recommended in the comprehensive plan for the residential units, and we have employed the age-restricted recommendation that the township itself put forward in its comprehensive plan. A township comprehensive plan is a legal document. It's adopted by the township. It's supposed to govern future planning ideas. It can be amended, it can be changed, it can be altered. It's not a governing document, it's a plan. The county reviews it. Also recall back in 2018 when we were here with the first ordinance amendment, the Chester County Planning Commission found that the proposal at that time was consistent with Chester County's master plan. Chester County's Landscapes 2020 plan identifies this area as suburban landscape. The county found it was suitable for what was proposed back then. The county commended the idea of having commercial in the front to reduce automobile traffic and to encourage pedestrian connectivity from the units, rather than getting in cars and driving to stores, being able to walk to whatever commercial activity may be out in front. So the Chester County Planning Commission commented on it favorably. The Calhoun Township Commission commented on it favorably. We're here tonight with an ordinance that actually proposes less development, or would allow for less development than what was proposed for at the time. Now let me go through some of the plan changes. I talked about the words in the ordinance, but they don't really mean a whole lot. It's a visual concept that everybody identifies with. You'll see in the first plan that we were proposing an access out on Lloyd Avenue to the development. On the reduced plan, there is no access out to Lloyd Avenue on the proposed development. All access would come from 322. Our traffic consultant can explain to you how that would work. We already talked about the reduction in density of the residential units, the no apartments, the building height, the no access on the Lloyd. The prior plan, we've also shown the existing farmhouse on its own building lot. The farmhouse has not been taken down. The farmhouse will be available for sale at market rate, but we would put conditions on that. Someone would have to come in and rehabilitate it, and we'd leave it on the market for a certain period of time to see if in fact there was interest for that. So that you'll see is starting around the possibility for the retention of the farmhouse. We didn't show pad sites out on the commercial because frankly, it's very speculative at this stage of the game. The ordinance is drafted, puts restrictions, and I know there's been a lot of disinformation spread, whether purposeful, unintentional, whatever, I can't tell. But the ordinance very carefully restricts the amount of commercial development that can be placed on the property. Originally, when we approached the township, we had proposed that this is about 7.5 acres in the front of the property on 322. We had originally proposed that the zoning for that 7.5 acres be zone C2, which would be similar to what is across the street, again, across 322 with the Taco Bell and the Royal Farms. The township expressed no interest in having a commercial C2 zoning district across the street. So we said, well, what other zone could we put in there? And the township said, all of our commercial zones are too intense for what we would like to see there. You craft your own uses and put them in the ordinance and put restrictions on them. There have been comments made that the district really is, that the allowance of commercial on that 7.5 acres is similar to the C2. It's not similar at all. When you take a look at the uses that have been eliminated from the C2, there are a variety of uses that the C2 would have allowed, or other commercial districts would have allowed, that this district was not allowed. And I'm looking for my list and I'll find it here in a second, but the first thing that comes to mind is a hotel, motel. There is no restriction on the size of a commercial establishment in the C2. There is in our ordinance. You can have up to 7,500 square feet by right. And if you go up to 20,000 square feet for a singular commercial use, you have to come back, ask the township's approval through a conditional use process. To give you some frame of reference of what those square footages are, because they probably don't mean anything in the abstract. I would say the newer CVSs are probably about 13,000, 14,000 square feet. trying to think of a restaurant pad site, might be around 5,000 square feet, what you see, you know, the restaurant you see driving around. We had always thought that probably what you might see out here is an urgent care clinic, physician's offices for obvious reasons. It'd be a nice place to establish. Most of those clinics that you see might come in at 5,000 or 6,000 square feet. The development we have laid out and the schematics we have done is based on a variety of township ordinances, including setbacks, parking requirements, allowance of areas covered. The maximum amount of commercial space that can be developed on this property is about 20,000 square feet, all in, all said and done. And I saw reference to a Home Depot. They run about 140,000 square feet, so I don't know where that comparison came from. But to put that in frame of reference, this is about a 20,000 square foot allotment of commercial space. Again, when the county reviewed the ordinance, they commended the utilization of the frontage of the property as commercial space. One of the comments the township engineer pointed out is that the plan as drafted, and again, it's a sketch plan, it's not a design engineer plan, it doesn't show connectivity, pedestrian connectivity from the residential to the commercial. Of course, as we come in with land development plans, it would. That's a selling point for us for these commercial properties. It will be a selling point for anybody who locates here to have accessibility to the residential community. They will take access off this singular access drive. Some other provisions of the ordinance that were in the ordinance that you previously recommended and we've retained in the ordinance is that in lieu of sidewalks along the streets, we have a series of interconnected paths, trails, which are much more desirable in adult communities. I've just done an adult community up in West Brandywine, which is under construction as we speak. West Brandywine Township willingly did away with the sidewalk requirement in lieu of a trail requirement. They would be paved trails, asphalt trails. It's much more conducive to this kind of community where we find from experience in the over 55 community is folks like to walk on the trails throughout the community and not just on the sidewalk. So it's a quid pro quo. You want trails, we'd rather do trails. You want sidewalks, you can do sidewalks, but we don't like them. We don't think it's the best for their clientele. But then would be no trails. We were asked to take a look at a perimeter trail around the property, which is consistent with the county's and the township's trail plan. You'll see, you can't see, but if you come up and look at this plan closer at break whenever they have a chance, there's a trail system shown around the perimeter of the property. For now, we would run it along here, along the back of the commercial, and then it comes down along Lloyd Avenue and connects, provides access eventually to the park down there. The setbacks provided for this plan are much greater than the setbacks in the current zoning ordinance for this district. This setback, when I say setback, I mean the distance from the lot to Lloyd Avenue. This setback is almost 100 feet. Isn't it about 100 feet? 150 feet. Landscape berm. Under certain, by right, under existing zoning, there doesn't have to be any setback for certain uses. You come right up to the street, put a sidewalk in along Lloyd Avenue, you call it a day. You'll see that the stormwater management locations here, again, conceptual. We looked at areas of the property that would be conducive to collect stormwater management. This is probably where they would go. Probably where they would go. Same thing with the buffer along St. Martha Manor, even though it's already heavily landscaped. Most of that landscaping is on the Martha Manor property. I think the buffer over here is what, 50 feet, Ken?
It's well, 50 feet with the pipeline, by the way, and then whatever that's on the other side of it.
So at least 50 feet here, again, in excessive, except for our own ordinance requirement, which we created in our ordinance. In our ordinance, we said should have at least 30 feet. The engineer, township engineer, did point out that in the back here, along where we, I guess this is the park back here, that we would have to bump that out. I mean, we just missed that in laying out these lots. But we fully intend to maintain the 30-foot buffer that our ordinance would require. We proposed a pretty severe landscaping requirement. You can see some of the trees on the plan. As your engineer pointed out, landscaping is not, we didn't draw this to match the ordinance per se. That comes in the next step when you go to land development plans, where we would have to, we're proposing 1 foot for every lineal, 1 tree for every lineal foot of perimeter buffer,
10 feet.
10 feet, for every 10 feet rather. And then 1 tree for every building lot, which is in excess of 450 trees, I believe, on the property at the end of the day. We're fortunate that there's some tree stands back here. There are no remarkable environmental features about the property. We don't have wetlands to worry about. There's no stream corridor to worry about with no farm. So that end of it, from a development perspective, is a good thing. For laying out the property as we've laid it out. So with that said, that's the general, in terms of the capsule, what's changed from the ordinance that we previously asked you to take a look at and what we now have in front of you. Principally, I'll reiterate, and then I will sit down and be quiet. And Matt Hammond will talk about traffic proposals. The principal changes are, as I said, the reduction in the density on the plan, the residential density, the lowering of the building height to 35 feet to be consistent with the neighborhood around it, the elimination of multifamily apartment uses on the site, and again, we've retained the age restriction and the elimination of access on Lloyd Avenue. I will say, in all fairness and in all candor, in some brief discussions I've had with Ray Stackhouse in the township, it was mentioned that what you might want to do is punch through, and we think it's probably a good idea, and it's probably required by code, an emergency access for fire vehicles to get in on the Lloyd. You never like to have access to a community for obvious reasons. You would like to have emergency access here off the side, so that probably would be a development that we would see. We're not here necessarily tonight to talk about the plan. I want everybody to recognize that. And I don't want to mislead anybody. This is to change the text to allow for the use in the zoning district. There are other uses that you presently can build in the zoning district, some much more intense than this, some less intense than this. But this is the use that the comprehensive plan thought would be a good idea. This is the use that we think would be a good idea. We think it would be a benefit to count. The average, we always get asked what are the average sale prices going to be. We did a fiscal impact study where you have to project out. Let's project out sales 2 years. Let's say we start in 18 months unit sales. I know my client's going to kill me to say start a year, but let's just project out 18 months. And I think when we were projecting the single families at that time, would probably go for about 450. The towns might go for 350. Now, I said the same thing in 2006, right before the recession, and nothing sold for anything for 3 years. So, you know, everything is market driven. But if things stay relatively calm, the way they are, that's the projected price range for these units. I did have, before I turn it over, I did have some very brief fiscal numbers that if I can find them here, I wanted to present to the Planning Commission, and if I can, I'll present them after Matt is done talking about traffic. What we looked at generally, what a municipality likes to look at is they like to make sure when they're changing the zoning that, yeah, it's a good planning idea, but it's not a disastrous financial idea. There are some zoning schemes you can change to, which actually, at the end of the day, end up costing the school district money, end up costing the municipality money. So most municipalities ask us to do a thumbnail fiscal impact study. And we've done that here. Again, you can see where these vary. It all depends on what the market is in 2 years. So you've got to make projections of what you think the selling price will be, because that drives taxes, it drives property taxes, everything else. I can get into as much detail as you want. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail. I'll just give you the thumbnail. If you have questions later on, I'll answer what I can on the fiscal. The total benefit of real estate tax is assuming build out, and we assume 20,000 square feet of retail on the frontage of the property, 195 dwelling units that I talked about earlier. Between the school district, county, and Count Township is about $2 million in annual tax revenue. Count Township would probably be the recipient of about $155,000 of that. That's on an annual basis. The Coatesville School District is the real winner here for obvious reasons. We go by the appraisal of the property, the sales price of the unit, approximately $1.7 million annually for the Coatesville School District without one expense. But we also project in the township, the reason most municipalities embrace over 55 housing is because the streets are private, there's no maintenance, of the internal street network. There's no township maintenance of anything on the 60 acres. There is, of course, police service. Other than that, Public Works doesn't come into the site. So you can see where the expense side of it, why adult age-restricted housing is often looked at favorably by municipalities. The county taxes are, or the county's tax revenue I have here $192,000 on an annual basis. And the fire company, I guess there's some services tax that goes to the fire company here is about $26,000, $27,000 on an annual basis. Again, it'll take build out to realize all of that. Obviously, you don't get all this in the first year, but at projected build out, that would be about what the revenue projection we see would be. With that, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to ask Matt Hammond. We've allotted ourselves, or the commission's allotted us about half an hour, so Matt has about 10 minutes to talk about traffic. I know in the question and answer period, a lot of questions about traffic. Please, I wanted to take the time to explain to you what we've done, what we've looked at so far, and we can answer questions when the time comes. Thank you.
Good evening. Again, my name is Matt Hammond. I am with Traffic Planning and Design. I am a traffic consultant with respect to this subject property. I have been before the Planning Commission to talk about what Lewitt referenced as the 2018 plan. Again, 225 apartment units and approximately 121 single-family detached units and give or take 20,000 square feet of retail. Back in 2018, we did prepare a traffic impact study, which is essentially an analysis of how the roadway network operates today, how it's going to operate in the future, and how it's going to operate in the future with the development. And based on township and PennDOT standards, we're required to mitigate the impact of development. And not only just mitigate it, but hopefully improve the roadway network so that the roadway network is actually more efficient and safer after the subject development is constructed. Just to give you a flavor for a typical traffic study, this is the traffic study here. It's about 600 pages of very riveting information that I'm sure everyone would love to read.
321, I think it's 321, right?
So we have prepared a traffic study based on the original plan. The traffic study was submitted to both the township for review, also to PennDOT, because PennDOT governs 322. We need to seek approval from PennDOT as well for the access and anything that we do within the PennDOT right of way. As I mentioned, it was submitted, it was reviewed. Back in late 2018, PennDOT accepted the traffic study, basically approved it. And that included the plan as shown here, the 2018 plan with 4 access points. 2 access points on 322, a right in, right out, and a main access opposite Rock Raymond, and then 2 access points on Lloyd, one closer to the parking ride lot, and then one over across from Beaver Run. There were also certain improvements associated with the development at the time. Probably the most notably was the request by PennDOT and the fact that the applicant agreed to do this was to relocate the 30 eastbound off-ramp closer, further north, so that it aligned with the on-ramp. So everyone's familiar, when you're exiting Route 30, Business Route 30, you have that wide sweeping right turn, and it's a short weave area between that ramp and Lloyd Avenue. PennDOT asked us to move that ramp further away, create more weave area. That was something that the applicant agreed to do at a pretty significant cost, approximately $500,000. There were also other associated improvements. A lot of them were pedestrian related, some were access related, minor widening on Lloyd Avenue, up near the intersection with 322, as well as some widening on 322 between Lloyd and Rock Raymond Road, as well as some modifications to the intersection of Rock Raymond and the driveway to accommodate the 4th leg of the intersection. Putting that aside, obviously there's a new plan in front of you for review. Again, that includes, I believe it's 103 single-family detached and 92 townhouses, all age restricted. So obviously from a traffic perspective, it generates less traffic than what was previously proposed. When you compare 200 and 47 units, give or take, to 192 units. The retail aspect, the commercial property, the commercial development on the frontage of Route 322 and Lloyd Avenue stays the same, that's a constant. The original plan, it was assumed to be about 20,000 square feet total. The proposed plan still assumed to be 20,000 square feet total. So, you reduce the number of units, thereby you reduce the number of the amount of traffic that development would generate. We completed another traffic study. We did submit that to both the township and PennDOT for review. We did receive comments from PennDOT. There were very minor comments, which we'll be able to address through the process, assuming that we're fortunate enough to move forward. We also did receive some comments from the township's traffic engineer. I believe it was 6 comments. I am confident, based on those comments, that between the township's traffic engineer and myself, that we'll be able to address those comments to his satisfaction. There was nothing that I felt was significant within those comments. So, again, as we move forward, we'll continue to address comments, we'll continue to work hand in hand with staff, as well as the township traffic engineer, to make sure that we're providing all of the improvements, whether they're vehicular or pedestrian, that they feel appropriate. But one of the things that I wanted to maybe concentrate on a little bit tonight was some of the discussions that have been held regarding the amount of traffic that will be generated by this development. I've heard numbers thrown around that say traffic will increase by 50% due to this development. And I can tell you that is absolutely not the case. It's not even close to being the case. The original plan, again, assumed 225 apartment units, 125 singles, and 20,000 square foot of retail. We also looked at the by right zoning of the property. What could we build today without having to go through this process? What we could come into the township with and say, we are going to build this. This meets your current underlying zoning, and what could you build? Now, granted, there are a number of uses in the R2 district you could build. Just not to belabor this, but just a few. Obviously, single-family detached units, residential cluster development, private golf course, educational uses, recreational uses, hospital or medical center, nursing home, churches or religious uses. The list goes on. Municipal uses, public utilities, group homes. So there's a number of uses that generate traffic. So the bottom line is whatever is developed on this property is not going to stay vacant. Something will be developed on this property. There's going to be additional traffic. We have to figure out how to manage that traffic. But some of the uses that are currently allowed under the current zoning don't generate a lot of traffic. A golf course doesn't generate a heck of a lot of traffic. Depending on the municipal use, a public utility use, a general agriculture use, probably doesn't generate a lot of traffic. But none of those are being proposed. We looked at some of the uses that may potentially be able to be developed on the property based on the current zoning. We had a civil engineer look at it and give us a back of the envelope kind of calculation on some square footage of some of these uses and what could be developed. And what we found was based on the current zoning, by right uses, you could develop a medical office building and a nursing home. That medical office building could be nearly 300,000 square feet. And the nursing home can contain nearly 400 units. If you were to generate the traffic associated with those two uses that are allowed under current zoning, you would see almost 10 times the amount of traffic that's being proposed by this development and this overlay. 10 times the amount of traffic. We also looked at, and we've heard this before, what about just do single family homes? We'll be fine with single family homes, put them on the property and we're done. Well, I can tell you that if we put single family homes on the property, we can fit about 146 single family homes on this property. And based on that, 146 single family homes would generate more traffic than what is being proposed in this plan to my left, the current proposal. So, It's a common, it's known from a traffic perspective, the age-restricted developments generate less traffic than traditional market rate developments, than traditional single-family developments. And we've looked at, like I said, comparing all of those various options. Again, the original current plan from 2018, the two proposed by right options, the single family, what I'll call the medical office building option, and then the current plan. And just to put it into perspective, the plan that we have shown here today and what's being proposed will generate approximately 24 to 30% less traffic than was previously proposed and was recommended by the Planning Commission and the Chester County Planning Commission. Generate about 30% less traffic than a single-family home by right option, and 90% less traffic than the current zoning allowing medical office and nursing home use on the property. So, from a traffic perspective, and again, we hear traffic, it's an issue, and it's an issue every municipality that I go to. From a traffic perspective, this is one of the lower intensive uses based on what could currently be built there on the property today.
Thank you. I think that eats up our half-hour presentation on this. Okay, so we can answer questions from the commission and proceed.
Questions for the commission? Yeah, I think we first need to set the record straight here. We've never voted on this text amendment. We've never recommended, we've never denied. It's been stated 3 times that we recommended approval. We've not.
I have the minutes of the meeting,
You were here in October last year,
right?
and it was a preview. You weren't even on the agenda.
Township Planning Commission meeting, November 20th, 2018. There was a discussion with the Planning Commission. Lou Colagreco, Cheryl Spalding, Terry Miller. Mr. Simon made a motion to recommend to the Board of Commissioners for the overlaid age-qualified ordinance for a commercial area along Lloyd Avenue as depicted. The motion was moved by Mr. Robinson, seconded by Mr. Benko. Mr. Simon, aye. Mr. Robinson, aye. Mr. Benko, aye. John Thomas, aye. Mr. Caporal, nay. Motion passed.
Sorry.
We also made a recommendation to that commercial.
So why didn't you do it?
What's that?
Why didn't you do the last one?
Well, we didn't do it because we'd heard there was resistance, believe it or not. We responded to what we had heard at some of the meetings. I know that's hard to believe. We heard there was resistance to the height, number one. We were asked to bring the height down to be consistent with Markham Manor, which is actually higher than what we're proposing here.
Can I ask you a question?
Let me finish, and then, sorry, finish answering your question. Why didn't we do it? That's why we didn't do it. We also didn't do it because we had heard that there was opposition to the access down on Lloyd Avenue. That's why we changed that. We heard there was feedback regarding the allotted density that we had in our ordinance, so we reduced that. We heard that the commission wanted to put limitations on the commercial, so we put more limitations on the commercial. We also had heard that we had had a portion erroneously earmarked for commercial development down the corner along Lloyd. We were asked to change the map to make sure that that could not be used for commercial development, so we did that. So those are 5 35,000-foot reasons why we didn't do it, and I could go on for another 10 minutes as to why we didn't do it. But that gives you an idea as to why we didn't. And I think the way the commission has this set up is they were going to ask questions in the audience.
The one question I had was that line on Lloyd Avenue, we had it going up much further up down the bank.
Yes,
Yep.
that's right. And we moved it back.
You moved it back.
That's right.
Not quite far enough.
That's right.
As far as I was concerned, but.
Well, we moved it back, so that was the map adjustment that we made.
2 things to clarify. You're saying the roads would not be dedicated? For what reason?
Most of these communities like to maintain their own roads. They,
And the farmhouse would be offered for sale?
yeah,
Is it over 55?
yes, have to be.
Okay.
And why did you destroy it already?
To respond to the other question about the road dedication, if the township wants dedication, they can have the roads. I mean, I've been doing this for 36 years, and anytime I have a client who recommends maintaining a private road system, the conversation usually doesn't go much further. The other reason we like to keep it as a private road system is because what we have found, again, in age-restricted communities, is a lot of the folks who live here like to walk in the streets. They like privacy of the community. So for that reason, we would prefer to keep them private, obviously. I have no axe to grind. If Gown Township says, no, we want to maintain those streets, have at it.
Your comment was that the communities don't want to, they want to own the road.
The adult community.
The townships don't want the responsibility. Your approval process for a development would be much more difficult if you insist that the township takes over maintenance of the roads.
The township
So
has,
it's not the community that doesn't want it. I can tell you for my community, we have to plan $250,000 to resurface the roads. And we pay $40,000 a year to do snow removal. Because the township, well, and I'm not arguing with the township, that decision was made and everybody lives with it. But don't mislead everybody that it's the communities that don't want, that want to maintain.
nobody
the roads.
is misleading anyone. The
You
state-
said the communities
This
don't want these.
community, the age-restricted communities.
That's
we
the
have
one I
found-
live in, Lou.
We have found that the age-restricted communities, well, maybe, you know, if your community, the township can take dedication even if we propose private streets. They can come and take dedication tomorrow.
I know they can.
Yeah, I know.
They
Okay, hold on, I'm gonna stop that comment right there. Are we finished up here with our questioning? Okay. Let's come back here, and then also too, we ask that you announce yourself and your address and
Yeah.
just shout out.
I apologize.
So we got a question up here?
Can you go through the parking right now? Because I'm looking at the
Yes.
plan, and you have one overflow parking for the community center. But according to the review that we have, given the cartway width of the streets there, there's gonna be no on-street.
That's correct.
So what happens when there's overflow holidays?
Well, the ordinance requirement, even your ordinance right now for street development, a single-family residential neighborhood without age restriction requires 2 parking spaces per unit. These spaces have actually 4 per unit. There's 2, the single-family detached at 4 per unit. There's 2 garage spaces, 2 driveway spaces. The townhouses will have 2 driveway spaces, 1 garage space. So it's already parked in excess of what the township ordinance would require. For visitor parking, what we've allotted, the current ordinance, we call this our community center. When you look at the township's definition of community center and the parking requirements for it, it's 1 space for every 500 square feet. So that would require 20 spaces, I think, as you pointed out. However, if you also, and we've provided that. But if you also look at the township's definition of community center, it's a quasi-public building that's open for use by the public, for the residents in town. This is not. But so we've got the 20 spaces, you know, the closest parking ratio we could find in your ordinance was for community center. We've got that there. We've got about, after that, anywhere from, again, this is just a sketch, anywhere between 15 and 18 visitor spaces. The engineer points out that when you go to lay this out, when you go to put landscape aisles in, you might be challenged to get those spaces. But parking is the least of our problems. We can have that fluctuate, we can provide more. Again, this is just conceptual. I'm not even sure this clubhouse is gonna be 10,000 square feet, so that ratio could change. But based on what, again, has been required in other adult communities, other communities that have been built, the last thing you wanna do in an adult age-restricted community is not provide enough parking. That's one of the selling points of the community. Most of the community center activity will be walkable. Again, it's only for use for those in the community. Trail system is laid out that way to as I said, it's either trails or sidewalks. We think trails are nicer, but somehow or another you'll get to the community center if you live in the development. Yes.
Let's talk about sidewalks. I'm a walker in the township, and when you walk the township, it's really amazing how disconnected all the pieces of sidewalk are. Hard to walk around here. And you're talking about not including sidewalk frontage on Manor Avenue. Now, one property away, you've got St. Joe's Parish, and that's connected to sidewalk all the way to downtown, public sidewalk. Why wouldn't you connect to that?
Well, that's a good question. It's a good question. The trail system, as I said earlier, that was not shown on this plan, we expected that to be a topic of discussion at land development. It could be a sidewalk out on Manor Avenue in lieu of the trail continuing. We'd like to find a way to have the trail continue through here and then come around to the trail system along Boyd. If that's not possible physically, then certainly you could have a sidewalk out on 322. Good.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, a couple of the recommendations, one of the things that was made very clear to us in the very beginning of this, at least from PennDOT's perspective, was connectivity. Pedestrian connectivity, if you're familiar, obviously, with the Taco Bell application. Taco Bell is proposing sidewalk along their frontage, which is on the opposite corner of Rock Raven and 322. And they're actually building a missing piece of the sidewalk, which exists on the north or east side of Rock Raven Road. If you're familiar, there's probably a property's worth of missing sidewalk on that north side for 322 that's being done in conjunction with the Taco Bell. One of the things that I failed to mention, and one of the major improvements that we're doing as part of this application, is we've discussed with PennDOT, had meetings with PennDOT about, instead of doing the ramp improvement, which will likely be done at some point when other major improvements are done in that area, probably the more important improvement, the better improvement would be to widen Rock Raven Road. So that when you're coming down Rock Raven Road to 322, you'd actually have a 3-lane cross section. You have a separate right, you have a through lane into the development, and you have a separate left turn lane. That's one of the pinch points, not only during the peak hours, but when school lets out, obviously, during the afternoon and when parents are leaving in the morning. And as part of that, there will be pedestrian connectivity across the intersection on likely both sides of the driveway, across 322 to connect to that trail, that sidewall system. We've also talked about the possibility of a connection right adjacent to the driveway towards the downtown borough side, as well as pedestrian signalization accommodations at the intersection. And again, if you're familiar, sidewalk that goes up Rock Raven Road, as part of the Taco Bell application, we're putting a rapid red flashing beacon so that people, high school students, middle school students, residents, whoever it may be, have a safe place to cross outside of the signal at Rock Raven and Manor Avenue.
Well, the reason I said that is, this planning commission is pro sidewalk, and I want all the people out there.
You talked about access or residents using the commercial property and accessing them, but we don't see any access from inside the development.
No,
How would that occur?
We just haven't developed a land development scheme for that. There would obviously have to be that. Until we know where those pad sites will want to be, until we know what they look like, it would be purely speculative. We could throw on sidewalks on this plan, but my guess is that they would probably be moved. And again, we're not asking for plan approval, this is just a concept, but my guess is, yes, no pad sites, here, and here. It obviously provide access back in here. It's easy enough to do.
Is the plan financially viable without commercial?
Well, that's a good question. If you expanded the residential and you did more residential out here, maybe. The reason, again, that we like commercial is for all the reasons I previously stated. We think it's going to be a benefit to the community. We think that it's so scaled down that it was meant to be neighborhood commercial retail. And when you read the restrictions in the ordinance, we tried to get it to that limitation.
How many partners have gone into business in this movie?
It's difficult.
It's not happened. The Kmart closed, go down to the Home Depot shop and all those places.
The places that are closing aren't the places we would want. We don't want Kmart. We can't have Home
But
Depot.
little guys aren't able to afford $4,000 a month in rent.
Sir, I'm gonna stop you right there.
All right.
Let's go back. Anything further up here?
I do. You talk about connectivity through the interior of the subject site and then outside, but what about the community? I mean, we gotta walk around that. I mean, you're saying interior trails, that's nice, but people don't wanna have to walk
Well,
through
this
there.
exterior trail would be available, there'd be a public easement on it. It would be available for public use.
So then in that case, could we switch that from a trail to a public access, ADA compliant, sidewalk?
It's whatever means of pedestrian circulation gets us there, yes, and this is just a concept.
Bike paths?
I don't know about bike, I guess you can make it wide enough that you can have a bike lane. You know, those are details to work out.
You touched on the possible fire entrance
Yes, sir.
at some location. Is that anything that's going to be definite?
Yeah, after speaking with Ray Stackhouse, I think it's very definite. They need to get in off Lloyd Avenue somewhere here. So,
Good.
yeah, it has to happen.
That area that you're pointing at now, this is what I don't understand. If the bypass has a bad accident, all the traffic gets detoured off, it's down Lloyd Avenue, parking lot. So how could that be a viable place to get an ambulance through to get on the bypass or whatever you have to do? Because in an accident, when they detour all that traffic, and I live off of Wood, ask my neighbor Tom, when that happens,
Well,
so
unfortunately,
is there another, I don't
yeah,
understand.
we're left with the frontage we have. We only have the frontage on 322, and we only have the frontage on Wood. I'm just pointing here because it's between two blue blobs. If it's up here, or down here, or somewhere else, I don't know if that would alleviate what you're talking about, but we only have the road frontage we have.
I'll stop that one right there, and I believe you've gotta have a fire accessibility somewhere, so there's no doubt about that. I mean, there's no other alternative but Lloyd Avenue, so we fix that.
But the whole idea is to be able to get the ambulances or whatever onto the bypass.
No.
I mean, or get them out, right? To the
Think about where they're coming from Thorndale, right? Is that what we're talking about, or Downingtown? You really gotta get into that community.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Hammond, I was curious why conceptually you would eliminate the right in, right out off of Manor.
So, at least from a residential standpoint, we felt that obviously with the concerns that we had heard in the past regarding direct access to Lloyd Avenue, that from the residential standpoint, we would look to eliminate that access and provide for the minimal number of access points that we could. We went from 4 access points, or 2 serving the residential and 2 serving the commercial, to 1 serving the residential. Now, as Lou had mentioned, this commercial area, we don't know exactly how it's going to lay out. Could I stand here and tell you that there will be no access maybe proposed on 322 or Lloyd Avenue? No, because depending on how the commercial lays out, depending on the type of uses and those type of things, we may request a right in, right out to serve
That's a
that
pretty
commercial
important fact
property.
right now, though.
Well,
I think it's a pretty important fact right now to lay that out.
In plan number 1 was the right in, right out connecting to Manor Avenue,
Yes,
so that's still a possibility.
that is still
And that
possible.
would be far enough away from the intersection of Lloyd Avenue to meet PennDOT standards.
So this plan, what we call the 2018 plan, this plan from a traffic perspective was approved by PennDOT in November of 2018. We received an approval letter, which again showed the full access driveway on Lloyd Avenue opposite Beavers, a right in, right out, possibly left in driveway opposite the park and ride lot, right in, right out on Manor Avenue, probably opposite the veterinary clinic, and full access driveway opposite Rock Raymond. Again, it's possible that there could be another access point on 322 at right in, right out, but it's not something that PennDOT has not seen before, and it's actually something that PennDOT has approved in the past.
When you say PennDOT, what kind of approval was that?
It was a letter we received on PennDOT letterhead that said the traffic study, which is essentially how the traffic study is laid out, is approved.
So it was a review of your traffic impact study.
Yeah, it wasn't the first review, there was a couple reviews and back and forth, but ultimately, we addressed all of PennDOT's comments and they felt satisfied at that stage that they approved the study, which is the basis for the design.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If I may clarify on that, follow up on that, I'm Jim Spalding from Lloyd Avenue.
Louder, please.
A question here, it seems a few months ago, we needed 8 lanes to handle the traffic as you presented here. And then you've made a very nice case, beautifully presented, of how you're going to reduce the load by 20%, and you can now get by with 2 lanes to handle all the traffic. I'm really uncomfortable with that. Can we expound on that a bit more?
Sure, and I'll let Matt do that. I don't recall 8-lane cross section on 322, but Matt, you're the traffic consultant.
I think he means 8 lanes because you had 4 access points.
Oh, you mean 4 access points? Okay.
Well, you had 4 access points, each with 2 lanes. Now you've got 1 access point with 2 lanes.
Correct. And as I mentioned, and based on the question that was presented earlier, there may be another access point on 322 to serve the commercial. I don't know yet. However, it ends up being a balancing act between providing safe and efficient access and providing the access that's desired. If you understand what I'm saying. We heard the residents' concerns loud and clear with respect to the access, especially on Lloyd Avenue. So then we looked at providing the access. How can we minimize access? Well, we only have another road frontage, which is 322 Anner Avenue. So if we are to address or appease the comments that have been made to date, we only have one viable solution, that's access on 322. As I mentioned, we prepared a traffic study. We submitted a traffic study. Nobody in this room has to agree with me or believe me or whatnot. The township is going to review it, and PennDOT's going to review it. They need to believe me. They need to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. If they don't agree with me, they're going to tell me. They're going to tell me I'm wrong, and I'm going to have to make changes. And that's the process we went through. This plan here, with the 1 access point and potentially the emergency access on Lloyd Avenue, was acceptable to PennDOT, based on the number of units proposed, based on the nature of the development proposed.
I'm sorry.
I gotta have some. Hold on. Before we turn it over, anything further? Okay, I'm gonna just point to you and call on you, and then just raise your, stand up, name and address.
Donna Urban, 54 Carlson Way, downtown. I think the last meeting that you had this kind of turnout to, a lot of people had already said they were not thrilled that it was being developed, but understood the fact that there would be housing placed on the property. The apartments were a big issue, and the commercial was a big issue. What I would say regarding the commercial property, I don't think we should approve an overlay with commercial, specifically because Commissioner Kramer just attended a school board meeting about a month ago, where he asked to enter into negotiations with the school board to create a LERTA with the township, which is an economic development plan to abate taxes, because there were 50 empty storefronts in the township. When you talk about commercial serving the community, we have that at Wedgewood. There is a townhouse community with a commercial access right there, right on Business 30, which is 25% empty. So 50 empty businesses. We want to give businesses, or they're asking us to give businesses a tax abatement so that they could bring in development, which, again, I understand, but who pays the cost of abating taxes for commercial business? The homeowners. Because we have to continue to pay higher taxes in the school district. So I would say no to the overlay, especially with that commercial. Thank you.
My name's Mark Young, 20 Beaver Run Road. The attorney here made a really good case about how many square footage for each of the buildings are going to fit in that commercial. 5,000 square feet for CVS, things like that. There's a little thing out there called the internet you can get a little bit of information on. So we're talking 7.5 acres. The 7.5 acres, Super Wawa will fit on 2.5 acres. The CVS will fit on 1.5 acres. McDonald's will fit on 1.1 acres. The Dunkin' Donuts takes on average 1 acre. And a Chick-fil-A has 1.4 acres. There's your 7.5 acres that you're going to try to rent out at the highest possible rate that you possibly can. Let's not say there's going to be a little doctor's office there, a little dentist's office, or a donut shop. and the page, all those people are gonna walk to it, just that development's gonna walk to it and support that. And none of the rest of us are gonna drive down there. You're gonna know what big things like restaurants, CVS, McDonald's.
Well, just to answer that question.
And
the
you say you were
commission-
gonna, wait, one second, let me finish my part. Last time you said you were gonna come back, at a later point, oh, we'll push the commercial off. Yeah, you'll get done everything you want now on your residential, then you'll come back and push hard on the commercial part. And that's just wrong. So, the people that drew up the current zoning, without any pressure coming from a developer, decided this area is not suitable for commercial development because of the traffic, because of the way the roads are structured. They were under that way, and that's the way they did it. They came up with it, they knew that development couldn't be anything commercial. So that's why commercial is not there, or else it would have been there a long time ago. We need to stick to their zoning plan. The zoning plan took into consideration allowing commercial development was not conducive to traffic. And then Rockbridge Road, I want to talk about more traffic. It's the only way out for all these folks that are here, from Dowling Forge and the woods of Rock Raymond. It's their only access out. Otherwise, they have to go through back roads, through country roads, and they're not gonna do that. It's way out of the way. That's their only way in and out of their communities. And if you've got that much traffic coming out of that apartment complex, or townhouses, single houses, and the commercial, they're never getting out where you put 1, 2, or 3 lanes in that part. So I don't think you're being fair. I think you're also using scare tactics. It's really, because when you said that you can come in right now and build a hospital and a nursing home, that's what you're trying to do, is scare these people. So that,
Let me just respond to your hypothetical. You use the internet for your research, and it's dangerous sometimes to use the internet for your research.
it's factual.
The uses which you just described are specifically not permitted in this zoning district.
You mentioned the CVS,
Let's
when you
start
talked
there.
about it.
I'm giving you relative sizes. A pharmacy may be permitted here. A McDonald's is not. A Super Wawa is not. A drive-through restaurant is not. Drive-through capabilities are not. So 5 of the 6 hypotheticals you gave, due to the editing by the township, we did originally propose that. It was taken out of the ordinance. So those hypotheticals, if that's what you're worried about, the township specifically said that we don't want a Taco Bell, or we don't want a fast food restaurant with drive-through, out of the ordinance. We don't want a Royal Farms or a Wawa, out of the ordinance. We want neighborhood support commercial. So if we're going to be fair about that, let's be fair across the board.
Okay. Let's
All right,
go back
so
to-
you can't do any of those things
Okay,
you
so
want.
you can't
under
do
our
those,
ordinance.
but you're going to do buildings that are going to maximize the potential of that lot, no doubt about it. It's not going to be simple little country stores like we heard about like a year ago. It's not gonna happen. So why don't you guys just admit it and say, no, somewhere we're
We don't
going.
know what it's going to be. I'm glad you have the foresight to see what it's not going to be. We don't know what it's going to be.
You got
We're
foresight
trying
to run
limit
the scare
it.
tactic.
We're trying to limit it. It's not, sir, let me explain something to you.
No.
What has been said about this property is go away and develop it by right. It's been said by some. I've heard from others that they love the idea. But if you go away, and if we come back, and if the township decides not to rezone it, that's up to the prerogative of the commissioners. All we're suggesting is, we've been approached, there are other viable uses for this property. And when we come back, and we're not asking for any permission, or any rezoning, or anything like we're doing here tonight, we're presenting any new ideas, and you get any one of the multitude of uses that are permitted in that district, that's the end of the conversation. We're gonna say we gave it the college try, we're gonna say we came. We specifically heard earlier, you may not have been here,
Not here.
the earlier proposals called for a CCRC medical facility on the property. There is huge demand for that in the marketplace because of the demographic and the aging of the population. All you have to do to see what's going on around us. My office alone in the last 5 years has probably done 10 assisted living facilities. They are very popular. There's no problem with that going here. It's located next to the interstate, it's located next to a major highway, so all I'm suggesting is to put this in frame of reference. We looked at the comprehensive plan, your township said adult age-restricted housing with a density of 5 units would probably be appropriate for this site. That's what we've shown. That's, well, sir, the genesis of the zoning change is the comprehensive plan. That's the way it works. The planners have paid a lot of money to come up with a future idea for the township. Not a past idea, not what we did in 1950, but a future idea for how this property may be developed. You have a nursing home right next door.
Yeah, we need to know it.
Well, let me tell you something. All I can suggest to you is it's a valuable piece of property, that's all. This is just another development.
Well, I think we should have questions to the commissioners now, not the developer.
We'll let that question go forward. Go ahead, please stand up.
Yeah, Vanessa Thomas, Beaver Run Road. I have a question about, back to the traffic person, okay? We're talking about an emergency access off of Lloyd Avenue, which we all can agree you have to have.
Yes.
Okay, my question is, how do you keep all of those students going to the four schools in a 3-block area from cutting through this community? Walking through this community, driving their cars through this community, because right now, Lloyd Avenue backs up so badly that I can see students cutting through this property to get to
They
322.
have remote accessibility to these things.
Excuse me?
They have remote accessibility.
So it
to
would be a remote, okay. And also, my other question is, when you did your traffic study, what time of day was
So, to answer your question, we did traffic study. We studied the traffic during the standard typical times, which is during the morning peak hours and the afternoon peak hours. So the traffic in the morning and the traffic in the afternoon. 6:30 to 9:30 in the morning. So just to clarify, I live West Bradford Township. My son goes to Downingtown Middle School. I'm absolutely familiar with the traffic problem. I'm absolutely familiar with the area. I drive through the intersection twice a day. So it's not that I'm coming to this township and saying, here's how it is. I don't believe you. I drive through it every day. I know. So we did it during the morning peak hours, which captures the morning time periods when the middle school, when the high school, when the STEM Academy, when St. Joe's is at its heaviest and people are leaving to go to work. We also look at it in the afternoon. For purposes of the study, we looked at 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. We understand that school lets out at 2:30. I understand there's heavier volumes, but based on previous studies we did, not only for the Taco Bell, but the Royal Farms and the STEM Academy, I was involved in all those projects. We found that the PM peak hour between 4 and 6 PM actually has more traffic on the road than does the time period when the middle schools and high schools let out. It may not seem that way, but it is. So those are the time periods that we analyzed. Those are the time periods we include in the study. Those are the time periods required for us to look at. We comply with that. No one that is reviewing this study or as part of this study has questioned those time periods.
I hear you say you were approving with that, to make it wider.
I did not. No, and I might as well address that now because I know that's a comment that came up in the past. There was discussions previously about widening Lloyd Avenue Bridge over the creek due to the fact that it's approximately 1 lane in each direction. Widening of the bridge. I just said approximately 1 lane in each direction. Not approximately. Actually, I've driven across. There's cars driven across the bridge simultaneously. So. Both sides.
Yeah, it's against the law. Yes, it is against the law.
So, to answer the question, there was discussion in the past about possibly widening the bridge. Widening the bridge is not an option, unfortunately. There's wetlands on both sides. It's an old historic stone arch bridge, so widening is not going to happen. So that's out of the question. What the township has done, because this application at the time these comments were being made, this application sat while we worked on revising the plan, refining the ordinance. The township has made a grant application to the state. It's called an ARLI grant, Automated Red Light Enforcement Grant. They have made a grant to the state, requested the state, for the funding necessary to signalize the bridge, to allow for it to stop in the northbound direction, let all the southbound traffic through, stop in the northbound direction, let all the northbound traffic through. That is something the township wants to look at, that is something that PennDOT wants to look at. Myself, I'm not convinced that signalization will help the situation. However, it is something that the township is looking at, it is something the township traffic engineer has asked us to help him look at, and we will do. But that is currently the proposal for the bridge.
Hold on. This gentleman's had his hand up for a little bit, so go ahead, sir.
My name's Mark Evans. I live at 103 Arrowwood Drive. I'm 62 and my shoulder is killing me. But I do drive a car. And drove here. 2 cars in our family. We're both over 55. No, you're not. First, I want to thank you for hosting this here, for making the room big enough for all of us to come. Because we have many concerns, many that haven't even been touched on here. And one thing that I want to make sure that you know is that we are offended by the way this team has presented themselves twice now. From the last meeting, was that in February?
Yes.
And then today, from Mr. Hammond, smirking and saying that he doesn't need our approval. He doesn't need us to like what he's doing. To Mr. Calagreco saying, hey, I got a hostage here. I got a hostage. You give us our overlay or we're going to stick it to you. It's not cool. Now, I want to say, Mr. Miller was very well aware when he purchased that property what it was zoned for. He knew it was for single family dwelling, and he could do it with 55 and up. He's now wants to rewrite that playbook twice. I think, I could be wrong, I like being wrong because I learn when I'm wrong. R2 as it is now, does that call for 50% of the land to be kept open? To preserve open spaces like grass and trees and beauty? And what they're requesting is only demands 20% of open space? Look, Township has thousands of square feet of empty commercial right now. And guess what? There's a recession coming. Mr. Miller might be in some financial trouble in a couple years himself because of what's going on in Delaware. This is a big deal. He could find himself short on funds. You give him this overlay, he can flip this to anybody he wants. It's not a good idea. It's not, they're not respecting you. They're not respecting us. We need open space. We don't need more commercial. They're going to develop, they're going to do something, yeah. I've been begging them for how long to sit down and talk to us. I'm sure we could come up with something. I know a message was delivered by a senior township official to these guys that some of the things they could do. I know that knowing that we wanted to save the farmhouse, that on March 2nd, on Saturday, March 2nd, in the middle of a snowstorm, they sent a crew of demolition workers up there to rip the windows and the doors off of that house.
And the fireplace.
And the fireplace, anything of value. But they wanted it exposed to the elements so that it could not be saved. And that was after, and then they got a letter from the state senator saying, what are you doing? Our people want to save that. Why are you ripping it apart? No response, no response, no response. They don't respect you. They don't respect us. There's ways to get things done. This is their plan is not good for Carroll Township.
Cheryl Spalding, 406 Lloyd Avenue. I just want to address, the density issue, so that I'm sure I understand this. Okay, when you calculated the density for this property, you also included the other parcels that are owned, or that is beyond this. There's some over here and some over here, is that correct?
That's not correct. That's, those other parcels are not part of this application.
No, I know, but they were not used for the density calculation at all. Okay. When you said 20,000 square feet, you're talking maximum 20,000 square feet on 7.5 acres.
Yeah.
That's 6% coverage.
Well,
It is.
Part. Could be a lot
Well,
more.
we're talking building.
Building, probably.
Building at 6%. Okay. That's what you're actually saying.
I don't know, I don't have a building plan in front of me, but once you let, it's parking which kills commercial.
Okay.
Granted, you know.
Here's my concern about the commercial. You said if it was 6% commercial, that's actually quite low, but when you talk pads, now you're talking pads. When you talk pads in our business, you and I know this, you're talking a bank, you're talking fast food, which you are correct in saying you can't do. What else can you do with pads?
Well, office building, pharmacy. If I could find my list, I have this written down. Give me a farmer, and I'll find it. Does anybody have the, yeah?
I got the list, I have one.
I just need the order. So the commercial uses that we've allowed for a child daycare center, a veterinary clinic, retail business, and again, the retail business would go to 20,000 square feet, that's sure, a retail business.
Okay, but let me stop here. You're talking 20,000 square feet on the entire place, not one pad.
You don't use the entire place for one time.
No, you
You
said.
might use a 20,000 square foot and heat up all of the commercial allotment on the time. It could be 4 smaller buildings, it could be 1, no building can be in excess of 20,000 square feet.
Okay,
That's
that's
the
very,
max.
very different than what you said before. Because what you said before was on 7.5 acres, you could only build 20,000 square feet. That's 6% coverage.
Right.
That's not what you're saying now. You're
We're
saying you could have a 20,000 square foot lot, you could have a 5,000 square foot lot, you could have another 5,000 square feet.
No. What we laid out, the maximum when you, and you don't have the benefit of the conceptual plans that, you could lay this out any way you want. But when you lay out retail at 4 parking spaces per 1,000, you wouldn't build parking structure here because it's not big enough and it doesn't justify it. So you'd have surface parking, 4 per
Talk about the
1,000.
buildings.
You back out the buildings, we don't think that you can get more than 20,000 square feet of retail on this entire 7.5 acres, no matter
That's
how
6%
you divide it up.
coverage. That doesn't make any sense. Well, I have to tell you, it doesn't make any sense.
The building coverage rate is,
The
they love
building
it.
coverage in the code is 40%.
Well, by the time you do the impervious, remember, there's an impervious coverage allowance for the entire tract. So a lot of the housing units are eating up the impervious coverage requirement for the entire tract. This is the last pod to be developed. The money in this property, the return of this property is not necessarily in the commercial, it's in the residential. We think the residential is going to drive commercial development. But let me finish the list of what the retail uses are. Okay, we just talked about retail. Medical or dental clinic, doctor's offices, personal services establishments. The code has that defined. That could be a hairdresser, hair salon. I don't even know who does personal services anymore. Mostly hairdressers, I guess, nail salons. And banks. And banks. That's it. That's the universe of this
But when you look at the
scary
site,
retail that we're talking about.
okay, but when you look at the site,
Yeah.
of the existing zoning, forgetting this green, because it's not green, it's commercial, you've got 20% of this land is open space. By existing zoning, it's 50%.
Well, it's existing zoning 50% if you develop certain uses. Under certain uses. If you were to max this out as a single-family residential subdivision, there's 0 open space requirement. Okay? I think that's the way I read your code. If you do a cluster development, there's all kinds of options in this zoning district. That's not the point I was trying to make. I'm not trying to scare anybody. You are correct. There are some uses that do require 50% open space. There are other uses that require no open space. There are other uses that require no buffer, no berm, no landscaping. or limited landscaping, I should say, not what we proposed here. So all I'm trying to do, look, at the end of the day, the decision of the township is to just leave it alone and go market it and build it as proposed. That's fine. But when we come back and we show you that, it's not as scary. You have to return, you gotta do something with the ground, we own it. So when we come back with that plan, don't be shocked and say, oh my goodness, I thought it was only 50% open space. There are some uses which do require it and some which don't. And the retail, if you read the ordinance, which allowed in the front of this property, is something that I don't think that you would mind being able to access and have in front of the property.
No, it's not about, it's about the fact that the reality is that commercial only here is just nuts.
I understand. That's a legitimate, I'm not, that's a
Transition
legitimate
was in
plan.
here before you were here. Okay? Transition was in here, and I didn't see the plan.
Tradition.
Tradition.
Yes.
Tradition was in here with a 100% residential proposal. The township, I'm not gonna get into that, the township did some things they didn't like, and they went up the street cross record. But, so it does work. If the money's in the residential, then boot the commercial out, because it's not for sale to us.
Your point's been made, Mrs. Spalding.
Yes.
Sir?
So it seems like the township, we're here to make a change to allow this development to come in. And they're actually giving you a strong arm tactic that they want to use against us to have this happen. So if we don't give them this, they're going to give us something worse. So as commissioners, we should be making the changes now to protect ourselves and not allow this to happen.
Back, all the way back. John Marty, Davenport. You put this plan in, hearing a lot of, well, could be, maybe, it might be, and you get your zoning variance based on this one. It's gonna change, could change. Why couldn't it be that one there when you decide to finally build something?
That's a good question. The text, this amendment, which is going to be, what we're asking you to enact, which is the law that governs this, it would prevent this from being built.
Why couldn't you bring us a plan that is very close to what you are really going to build?
This is it.
But it's not.
I've heard a lot of maybe, could be.
But the maybe and the
I didn't hear a lot of
could,
definite.
let me clarify that.
Okay.
The qualification is that it hasn't been engineered yet. When you engineer a plan, like I said earlier, stormwater may not be here. It may be over, it depends on what the soils will accept. There's $250,000 in engineering, geotechnical work that has to be done. We've done some very preliminary work to satisfy ourselves with this development scheme. If this ordinance were adopted, it would support this development scheme. We couldn't support more than this. Couldn't support more than this because there are limitations in the ordinance, but we think it could support this. You know, what sometimes happens is when you go to engineering, we may come back and we may find out, and I hope this isn't the case, you may find out that there's rock, there's some subsurface material, there's a million different reasons from an engineering perspective that this pod of units may not be built, or this pod of units may not be built. But I can't see anywhere on the plan where you could put additional units. So the other thing that the engineering would do is further limit what we think we could build. This was all done with a very preliminary subterranean site analysis. What developers look at this stage of the development game is the things you can see with your eyes. The surface constraints, as I said earlier, are there wetlands, are there stream corridors, are there other environmental features that you can see that would tell our planner to stay away from those areas. So,
Hi, Diane Curio. I'd like to, I'm Victoria Mary, so I'm on Town Township, but I'm right across the street. So I know that you said that you're looking at different studies and you're continuing studies, but our weather is changing. And just this last year at Lloyd Park, for those of you that go to Lloyd Park, we've had so much mud, so much wet, so much flooding that we can't use the park many, many times. For me, because I live on the other side of Mary, our field is completely flooded. We're getting more water into our houses, which means that we are having to deal with issues. So I know that when you look at these plans, which I'm sure you're going to, because you say you're going to, and I'm gonna trust that you're going to, with a smirk in my voice, sorry. My question is, do you reach out to the other townships and say, what happens between the townships if we build this and we put more water into the creek? What happens to us? Are you talking? And if you're not, then I'm requesting that you talk, because otherwise we have a big
Well, from a state regulatory perspective, I can tell you three things. One, as Mr. Hammond said, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe our reports. But the township has an engineer and a stormwater management ordinance that must be adhered to. The Department of Environmental Protection has stormwater management regulations, which we must get a permit to adhere to, which is very difficult sometimes for people to understand about development, because no one wants to acknowledge that there are good things to development. As of right now, my guess is that the stormwater management on this site is non-existent. It's an uncontrolled situation.
Well, you have a lot of land that brings all of the
Yeah.
rain in, it soaks up the rain, when you put in pavements, where is that rain going to go? Down.
By law now, by law, the flow after development cannot exceed this flow pre-development. By law, and you don't have to believe that, but every development I've done in 36 years is adhered to that permit. What we find, and people don't want to acknowledge this, what you often find, and I don't know where this flows, I don't even know if this flows to your neighborhood or your park. I don't know. So what you will find is that not only can we not increase the flow, we have to reduce the flow, we have to control the flow, and we have to treat the flow. So what you're getting from this property now, I will bet you, after, should this plan be approved, and should it be permitted, the quality of that fluid will be better, and there will be less of it. So, you don't have to believe it, but that's just the state regulation. That's the township regulation.
Yeah, you were up first.
Okay. Can I point out a couple things on your river and on the real estate map, the floodplain just touches the property down in here, but it calls the whole property to not be in the floodplain. When you add more water, who the devil knows how that floodplain is going to change? That's the one point. Second thing, this is snowflake panic in here, the same as many other developments I looked at before I moved into Beaver Run Knoll. Beaver Run Knoll has enough open in there where they can handle any snowstorm, and we did. We handled 30, 36 inches, 42 inches so far since I've been there. This is a panic. It's gonna be a panic attack if there's, the snow, because there's no place to put it. The other thing is going from Geo Carlson over to Rock Raymond Road. Did you ever brainstorm putting in that connecting piece through there? Because Geo Carlson, broken as it is across Beaver Creek, Beaver Run Creek, if a bridge were to be put in there, it would be direct access for the police out of County Township, but it is not now because there's no bridge that has been built there. So, did you brainstorm that? And what would that do to your development, putting all the townhouses on one side, for example, and putting all the single homes on the other side, if that would work out?
I can tell you that, again, I don't know the exact history of the Geo Carlson extension saga in the township, but when I was here with the previous traditions, Cheryl mentioned traditions, and they were proposing age development, the township at that time was looking at the extension of Geo Carlson, I think in the same way you're talking about.
Correct.
Maybe it's in a different place, maybe it's in the same place, I don't know. That defeated their plans to develop an age-restricted community, because it essentially bifurcated the community. I have heard since that the township has called on that plan, that extension of Geo Carlson Boulevard is not in the master plan. I don't know if that's correct or not correct, but I think I've heard that anecdotally, but we wouldn't propose doing that. As for the floodplain, you may very well be right. One of the things that we have to manage when we go out there, this is just my guess is a planner used a FEMA estimated floodplain, which is not unusual. When you come in and you actually do the engineered plans, as you know, you actually have to measure, you have to do tests to determine exactly where the floodplain is. So remember I said about engineering issues which could cause the plan to change. What this gentleman mentioned is a perfect example of an issue that if the floodplain is wider than the fall, if it gets expanded, you have to honor existing floodplain boundaries and whatever setbacks you have.
One other item, just everybody here knows about. Chester County is in a limestone region. And this, we've developed two sinkholes in different detention basins that they have a Fever Run Knoll. The sinkholes are perpetual. And by putting detention ponds in there, like this, that are permeable.
Yeah. Well, I know, the hotbed limestone activity in Chester County is along that East Whiteland Great Valley corridor. And for stormwater management plans along there, whether this would be the same or not, I don't know. Sometimes you have line basins, sometimes DEP discourages infiltration for that very reason. You'd have to test what's underneath. Obviously, you never want to irrigate in a limestone situation. There's other ways to handle the stormwater.
I'm gonna start calling on people that haven't gone yet, so. Right here.
Rose Mayo, 1234 South Red Maple Way in Downingtown. I'm in the Woods of Rock, in the 55 and over community. And just in a side note, have you ever interviewed people after they moved into a 55 and over community for a long time, you're saying it's so popular? And some of the things that we have encountered that a developer within our development for over 10 years, and some of the issues that we're running into, like the gentleman just said, sinkholes, things like that, and the snow removal, and that fact that our property is not plowed by the township, and we're paying over $160,000 to township and not getting anything for it. Plus, our school taxes are exorbitant, and we don't have any children. Mind you, my kids I don't mind paying my school taxes, but I also don't like the fact that being there in 4 years is going off over 10%. I think that's horrendous. If I had known that, I might not have bought there, that this was that bad. I'm also concerned with the fact of your HOA, how you're going to handle that. You're saying trails, we were told that we had trails when we moved in there, we don't have trails. You know, how long will it take the builder to build a size 195 homes?
I don't know what, I mean, these are all great questions. From an operational perspective, the build out of any community depends on the marketplace and the community. So if you presume, for sure. If you presume an absorption rate of maybe 10 units, whereas quickly the community might sell out, a reasonable absorption rate might be, in this economy, might be 8 to 10 units a month. So if you did 8 to 10 units a month, you can do the math as to how long it would take. The community would likely, again,
Still be 12 years.
no. If it's 12 years, then something.
Oh, a month, you said, I'm sorry, a month. I'm sorry, a month.
If it's 12 years.
A month, you said, sorry. It took 10 years.
It'll probably be phased. I don't know the land development plan, the whole community won't be built at once. My guess is, it'll probably be 3 phases. But I don't know that for sure. So it'll all depend on the absorption. As for the HOA, some of the older age-restricted communities, which are classified yours as, developers have learned, townships have learned how things not to do and things to do. Again, the streets, I have no horse in that race. We have just proposed it to be private because a lot of times they like the privacy of a private street. Someone in here, I didn't think of this, but somebody mentioned high school kids driving through here. That's a real possibility if this is a public street.
That's emergency access. We have emergency access, which I can't believe that the planning commission would.
Oh, that's right. If it's a controlled,
It has to be controlled. I cannot believe, and I would hope that the planning commission would see that. They can only have one access in for emergency, especially for 55 and over. Because I know sometimes where we do, I can't get out in the mornings, you know, and I do drive, and I do go out quite frequently during the day, even though I'm over 55. We do go out, and it's hard to get in and out. So I cannot believe that the planning commission that is not in the ordinance, that there has to be a way in, two ways in.
I think it's in the building code, to be honest with you.
That's what I would think it would be,
Yeah,
but I'm surprised you're not showing it on your,
it was trying to get something here. We didn't want to guess as to where it would be.
I guess, I understand
I think the
that.
building code requires 2 means of access. And finally, to your point, I think when your community was developed, it was pre-public offering statement requirement under Pennsylvania code. So now, when you buy property in any community, any homeowners association, the developers required to put out public offering, they call it PLS, public offering statement. Really what it is, it's a detailed description of what you're buying into, what your road maintenance costs are going to be, what your snow removal costs are going to be, what your HOA fees are going to be, and all of that. So some of the problems with the earlier communities that the state has now corrected through this legislation was just what we're talking about.
I hope so, because I feel as though the developers they're managing the community until it's completed and going through transition. So the homeowners have no say until it's done. So the developer can do whatever he wants until the community's taken over.
Not anymore.
My girlfriend's in Delaware and they're still having some issues.
Maybe in Delaware or
Maybe
down in
Delaware,
Pennsylvania.
but I'm glad to hear that.
I believe this gentleman has not talked to you.
Three points I'd just like to make for the commissioners and ask that you respectfully consider in making your decision to go forward with this. The first relates to what we're hearing tonight and what happened previously. The previous plan was rejected for one reason. Under the provisions that they presented it didn't meet the law. Now, these guys do this for a living. They've been doing it for 30 years, as they told us. In my mind, they fully well knew that and were trying to put one over on us. So consider that as you might, but the reason it was rejected is because the provisions under which they submitted the overlay didn't meet the law. Secondly, in spirit of why zoning changes should be looked at, in the township code, there's a unique set of items there, like there are unique physical circumstances or conditions, including irregularity, narrowness, or shallowness of lot size or shape, exceptional topographical and other physical conditions. That's one reason. The second one is because of those physical conditions, circumstances, or conditions, there's no possibility the property can be developed in strict conformity with provisions of current zoning. That such unnecessary hardship has not been created by the applicant. There's more there, but the point is, for these to be approved, we should be presenting reasons why it can't be done without doing this, as opposed to, look how good it's going to be for us. Because based on item 1, I'm not buying into that. And the third one is, I'd ask the commissioners to keep in mind that residents depend on zoning to some extent, and how it's currently zoned when they buy, develop, decide to stay, and changes that are made without conforming to those kind of rules, i.e. necessity, as opposed to desire, aren't in keeping with the best interests of where it's going. And I just ask you guys to consider that when you make your decision.
My name's Jeff Trego, 2 Beaver Run Road. Mr. Solicitor, I'll ask that you keep me in line here with my thoughts. Okay? Throw the flag at me if I'm totally off base. Part of what I do for a living requires me to deal with municipalities up and down the East Coast, from New York City to the city of Richmond and everywhere in between. And one of the things that I'm required to do is prove that I am or would be a vendor in good standing, that I meet all the requirements, etc. And my concern here would be that does this, and don't you take this the wrong way, does this developer, is he a developer in good standing for the state of Pennsylvania, County of Chester, Township of County. So that's my first tidbit out there. The second tidbit I would throw out is, I also come from an industry that works at safety factors, which means it's extra safe as opposed to what may actually be needed. The safety factors I see are 1 to 1.5 to 1 to 15, okay? It's all over the place, but it has to do with making sure the user of the piece of equipment I'm selling is safe. One of the things that I see over and over again is we hear talk of the 100-year storms, the amount of rainfall we have in areas and stuff like that FEMA bases their decisions on and draws their maps. There is no safety factor. How many 1 in 100-year storms have we had in the last 6 years? Okay? And as a township, we have to abide by FEMA and their maps. But we can do better than what FEMA is saying with their maps to allow for a better, help me, better living arrangements, better the parks, less quality of life, that's what I was looking for. That these don't become issues, that we don't have to spend, $250,000 in engineering fees when we're only 99% sure it's going to happen. If you're only 99% sure your brakes are going to work, and don't take this the wrong way either, but you're only 99% sure that your brakes are going to work on your car on the way home. You get inspected every year to make sure it's 100%. And I don't think some of these rules necessarily make sure that we're 100% covered as people across the street with a ridiculous amount of groundwater, on our side of the street, and we see it backing up across the street. I had 2 township commissioners in my driveway on one Saturday, a week after it rained, and that water was still standing. That means the groundwater is so high, there's no place for it to go. So, based on that, my thought to you guys is maybe we just need to slow down. Maybe we just need to table this. And I realize it's mid-process here. So it's a very fine legal line, I'm sure. But maybe we need to look at some of these things to protect us. Yes, each one of you brings something to the table. Each one of you is here thinking for us. And I appreciate that. I appreciate the concept of volunteering. I've been a volunteer firefighter for 37 years, okay? I know it, okay? You're not doing anything that I haven't done. And I've been on planning commissions before as well. But you need to look out for us, our properties, and our conditions as well.
Acknowledge any motions, but I'll take a couple comments here. You haven't made one yet, have you?
No. I have a question about the townhomes that I've been wondering about. My name is Donna Hetzel, and I live at 584 Lloyd Avenue. Are the townhomes going to be privately owned, or are they going to be rentals? Okay, and the reason I'm asking is because with that one, Mr. Miller said that the apartments were going to be rentals. So I was just wondering what the townhomes were going to be.
Let me not mislead anybody here. When I say they're going to be privately owned, just as the law cannot control whether somebody owns or rents it. You can all rent your homes. Every single person in this audience can rent their home. So the proposal is for sale units. If someone buys them and rents them, there's nothing anyone in this room or.
That's a good time to talk about the price points then. What's the price point?
We just, the price points that the fiscal was predicated on, I think I just told you, we're guesstimating, and correct me if I'm wrong, $450 for the single family detached, and maybe $350 for the town.
I just wanted to make sure that they were going to be for sale and not just rentals.
In other words, the builder's not keeping any of them.
Well, frequently builders do keep them until they sell it out.
Is the builder allowed to?
No, yeah, definitely.
Keep them rented.
Definitely. Yes, definitely.
So then we'll have transient people constantly coming in.
There's nothing I can do about that.
Do we there any percentage of that he is able, he can own as many as he wants?
The law is crystal clear on that. Local government cannot control the method of ownership and who you rent it to.
Leave that lady back there.
My name is Michelle Duval, and I'm at 586 Lloyd Avenue, right across the street from Donna. And my question is in regards to what you're requesting with the commercial. We are families living on Lloyd Avenue, and I am concerned that there would be any commercial entrances or any commercial views or any commercial anything on my street, from my front yard, where my 3 children play every single day, and all the kids in the neighborhood walking up the street to Royal Farms and things like that. I'm concerned that we bought a residential house, and now we have a shopping center that you're talking about putting in across the street from us. This is supposed to be a residential community. I am very against having any sort of commercial properties that would change the nature of our community where we live right now. And you're saying this is something that we would want to use, but as other residents have pointed out multiple times, we're not using the ones that are already there, because there's too many. There's too many, and you're proposing having some undisclosed amount of entrances, some undisclosed amount of exits that may or may not be coming right where my children are playing, right where my children are walking. And I don't think this sounds like a good idea. I don't think it sounds like a good fit for our community, and I don't like that you're coming here and proposing to change the ordinance where the worst part of the ordinance to most of the residents here is the most open. You are not giving us any details about what you're actually doing or how it's actually going to impact directly the people who already live here.
Well, let me just suggest one thing, and I appreciate your comments. If you open the zoning ordinance right now, every township in this Commonwealth, there are zoning ordinances and restrictions without anyone having ever laid out what those zoning ordinances lead to. I know for a fact that this township, and it's not a criticism of this township, no township could ever do it, you couldn't afford to do it. No one ever laid out what the current zoning district would allow for before they enacted the ordinance. What you try and do is craft words that limits what could potentially be there, but you never get anything done. So every zoning ordinance tries to control through words what eventually could be developed on the property. So that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to limit commercial access to the avenue. It was suggested to us at one time we had commercial down further down the way. It was suggested that we move back further towards 322.
It's further towards 322, directly past my next door neighbor's house, according to this drawing though, which means I'm looking at the sign. Why can't it just be on 322 or not at all? Because as others have pointed out, it's not a good fit for commercial at all. But the fact that this is the most controversial part of your proposal, and you're still not coming out and telling us where is it going to be a parking lot that we're looking at? Where is it going to be the side of a bank that I'm looking at?
Well, what we tried to do, maybe we didn't do it successfully enough, your points are valid. In the ordinance, when you read the ordinance, you'll see setbacks from where the commercial use cannot extend. It's setbacks from Lloyd and it's setbacks from 322. There's a footage, a linear foot limitation. I don't have it from it, but it's in the ordinance. So we've tried to control through dimensional criteria. No use can be, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here, now setbacks. There's some distance from Lloyd Avenue. There's some
95 feet from the center of the road.
Pardon?
95 feet from the center of the road.
That sounds right. So, you know, maybe that's, look, I'm not here tonight to criticize any comments, and please, don't take it as that. A lot of the commentary was good, well received. Maybe the words don't adequately achieve what you'd like to see achieved. But, you know, that's why we're here.
I'd like to just ask one last question. Is it possible for Mr. Miller to outline for us what he thinks the additions that Marshall thinks he did?
I'm Harry Miller, by the way. I'm a developer builder. We don't have an idea of what's going to be there yet. We don't have any potential money looking at it at this time. It's sometime down the road. We don't know if it's going to be 2 years or 5 years.
A vision,
Vision.
For the thought, for the commercial? I don't know. We've tried to restrict it as much as we possibly can to try to get something, a community-oriented type retailers in there, the dry cleaners, the hairdresser, that type of thing. That's what we perceive to see there. It could be, like you said earlier, it could be just, it could be just a couple small users there. It may sit empty for a while. There's no plans to develop.
I just wanted to hear you say it, so that.
I'm Leisha on Airwood Drive. I work in the healthcare industry, and I heard that you want to put a joint and hip center there. Is that true?
No.
No, I heard that was something
That would
to
be
do
an
with Tower
excellent
Health.
use,
No?
I was just in Concord Township last night, making a way to rezone property. These are, with a joint and hip replacement, with a joint and hip replacement, with overnight suites, it's in demand, and it's involved in nature. That is an excellent.
Keep consistent with the time that I laid out here at 9 o'clock. We're coming to a conclusion here. All your thoughts have been logged here, and they all seem to be kind of.
Excuse me,
Go ahead.
I have a question for you. So, I've been hearing all this stuff all night long about water retention and blah, 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 blah. Haven't we learned anything that's occurred over the Airwood Drive? I mean, in all seriousness, haven't we learned anything? I mean, I live at 140 Stonebridge Lane, okay? Butts right up to the Carolyn development. Have you ever driven in there? Because I'm here, and I'm a little upset about this because I'm hearing, we have this guy that handles water retention and this guy who does engineering and blah, blah, blah. Half that development's underwater. When Balbernie was building the place, he blew out my septic system with the water coming through. So, I mean, I think we gotta learn something from that. Correct? I mean,
Anybody want to take one motion or anything?
Well, the commission can discuss what they heard tonight before any motion is made. Basically, you have three choices. You can make a motion to recommend the Board of Commissioners consider this amendment. You can make a motion to recommend they not consider it. What? The commission can discuss the matter now on the record. They basically have three choices. Make a motion to recommend that the commissioners consider the amendment. Make a motion that the commissioners not consider the amendment, or not make any motion at all. In other words, not make any recommendation or let the Board of Commissioners decide what to do with it. So if someone on this commission, on the Planning Commission, wants to make a motion either way, you can do that this time by indicating that you support or oppose the proposed ordinance.
Is it an option to come back without the commercial?
You could make a motion that you would want the Board of Commissioners to consider the proposed amendment without commercial. Yes, purely a residential development. That, of course, would require that the ordinance be amended, but that could be done between now and any hearing by the commissioners if they so desire. And once again, it's really the Board of Commissioners' decision whether to have a hearing or not, regardless of what this commission does. So if the thought is to make, you could make a motion to recommend that the Board of Commissioners consider the proposed amendment, but without any non-residential development.
I make the motion that we recommend to the Board of Commissioners that the Planning Commission recommend the removal of non-residential from the zoning overlay.
Right, that they consider an amendment to the zoning ordinance which would permit a residential age-restricted development on the property with no non-residential development.
Second.
You can just say so moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Excuse me, everyone. I just want to make one point about this development. When I came into this parking lot, I parked over here, and the developer parked right by me. And on my way in, a volunteer fire person said, "Please park in the other lot." He said, "The developer, please park in the other lot." He said, "Oh, I've got my projector bring it." He said, "Well, bring your truck over the door." He said, "No, I'll come back and get it." His truck's there, there's no projector. This is who it's for. Remember that.
Thank you.
Hold on for 1 minute. I guess that's adjourned the meeting.
We gotta be on the public meeting. Any new business to discuss? Make a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All in favor?
Yeah, that's Brian.
New engineer?
He's been with us for years.
Well, it's going to take, it'll take some right now, you only have single family detached. That's not what I thought it went pretty well.
I don't know. I remember I felt this the thing that it depends on how we find it.
Take care.
They're looking at like a month.